balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here.
Welcome back, my friends. We are here for another episode of Internally Guided Life. And I think you are going to find today's topic incredibly nourishing. So, today we're going to be digging into the world of prosilience. This is a more proactive approach than what we typically think of when we think about resilience. And the way that our guest uses it is especially related to those navigating ongoing challenges like chronic illnesses, caregiving, those things that are going to be present in your life, and you don't really have the option to not be navigating it, to not be managing it. You have to find a way to thrive through it. And that requires a very special kind of approach that our guest is very versed in professionally and personally. So, with that, I'm so excited to dig into this. Welcome. We have Jenn Fredericks with us today. She is a Prosilience Coach and has spent her life not just living through this journey, but also teaching it, studying it, and really amidst her own challenges. Jenn has an amazing story, which I will let her share more about. But she's a two-time kidney transplant recipient, a caregiver to a daughter with a life-threatening chronic illness, and a Prosilience coach who is empowering people, walking alongside them, and helping them to find some confidence and calm in really uncertain life situations. So, with that, welcome, Jenn.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
I'm so excited to hear from you today. We talk about resilience and burnout and self-care and all these kinds of things on the show a lot, but never from your particular lens with your particular expertise and lived experience. So I just know you're going to add so much depth to my understanding and the listeners' understanding of how we can care for ourselves well, even in the most challenging situations where we're being asked to really show up.
Mm-hmm. I really love in the beginning when you were mentioning, being able to guide because I have been there. I've been living it for the past 3 decades for myself, almost the past decade with my daughter. And that's what really inspired me to dig into, okay, how can we prepare ourselves for life's challenges before they come to us? Or if we're already on kind of a downward spiral with burnout from whatever life's handed us, how do we bring ourselves back up without using all of our energy? And then prepare from there moving forward so that we don't have to fall down and
Yeah.
bounce back up.
Yeah, because that typical understanding of resilience, right? The bounce back, it's exhausting if you're a crash and burn and then bounce back and then crash and
Mm-hmm.
burn and then bounce back. Like there are things we can do to create some nourishment throughout
Mm-hmm.
and to prepare for these events.
Definitely. And I'm not going to lie, I was on the floor before I discovered coaching and the Prosilience framework. And so that's why I'm so passionate to be able to share it with people from my understanding, from coming from that place of being down on my knees and having to use all of my energy to pull myself back up just to maybe not fall all the way back down, but still stumble. And I'm not going to say I don't stumble because we're all human. What I am going to say is that I can recognize when I am doing that and then decide how I can best, catch myself, minimize harm, bring myself back to a resilient benchmark or baseline so that I can keep moving through the challenge without sacrificing. This is really important to me without sacrificing being alive.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful because it's this this journey that we're on. I mean, every moment of it's so precious. And so to be able to find a way to be able to appreciate that and feel alive within it and not feel like we're waiting for the time to pass or for the challenge to be over, but to feel alive within each of those moments and find that little bit of nourishment, whatever that looks like, that
Mm-hmm.
joy, that gratitude. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you got here. I think we kind of laid the bones of the story here. We've
Sure.
got the framework, but give us a little more depth into your work as a Prosilience coach and the journey that brought you here.
Sure. Well, to be honest, I originally thought I was going to be an actress on Broadway. So in
That's
high
amazing.
school, that was my goal. And I had had my first kidney transplant by then and was healthy and moving toward that. And in college, studying that when all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for all of my medications on an actress's pay? So I decided to add public relations to that and ended up graduating with a theater and PR degree and then working in marketing for 16 years. And during those 16 years, not only was I still nourishing my first kidney transplant, but I had all of those other milestones that you tend to expect to hit. College graduation or meeting someone, getting your first job, getting married or partnering, having a child, or in our case, adopting a child. And when that child was 4, I needed a second transplant.
Mm.
I was very blessed to be able to find a living donor match who's actually my husband's fraternal twin brother. And we're 12 years out from that. And I'm leading you kind of down the path of how I discovered Prosilience, but um, healed very well from that. Hit another roadblock in 2015 when my daughter was diagnosed with a low grade brain tumor when she was 7. And she's doing well. We're managing that. She's 16. She's doing some of those normal teenage things as well. But it was at that same time that I was laid off from my corporate marketing career. And while I thought I knew how to manage emotions and medical trauma and all of those things, it was much easier to manage it for myself versus someone who I love so dearly and witnessing it from that aspect. And that's when I fell.
Mm.
And that's when anxiety took over. And that's when it started to physically manifest to the point where I wasn't as healthy anymore. Coupled with the fact I was just laid off, I had this weird idea of, hey, why don't I become a life coach? I had never had a coaching session in my life, but something hit me and took me to that place. I'd participated in guided imagery and everything during my transplants because it helped me ground myself and align and heal. And as I was going through certification for general life coaching, I realized, yes, it was for a new career, but it really was to heal me.
Mm.
And as I kept going down that road, I just realized how much I loved holding space for others and helping them heal, helping them explore, helping them really live the life that they're wanting to live. As I was doing that, as well as managing my own illness, managing my daughter's illness, people would keep asking me, how are you so resilient? And
Mm.
I didn't have an answer. And I started researching resilience, compassion, fatigue, compassion, resilience, and then ran across a framework called Prosilience or proactive resilience, developed by an industrial and organizational psychologist. So she used this evidence based framework that she'd been researching for 30 years within organizations. But as I was reading the book, it was like she had followed me since I was 15 years old. I finally had language and a framework to say to people, this is how I'm so resilient.
Mm.
And so now I'm able to use the framework as well as my lived experience and just the profound knowing that those with chronic illness, those facing difficult life challenges, those who are caregiving for loved ones really crave a space where they can be exactly who they are and explore how they might be able to truly live as they're moving through these life's challenges.
Yeah, wow. I just have to say thank you again for sharing your story and coming on. I just think when it comes to being a living example of this, you are your entire energy, just talking to you, I can feel your calm, your peace, your presence here with me right now, even across, states.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a hard earned thing for many of us to get there. Like there's so much healing required on that journey. And so I think the fact that you've been able to move through that and navigate this career switch and really soul calling, right?
Yeah.
Amidst all of these life challenges, and to do so like holding so much grace and space is really powerful. I think it really shows people what we can do. So thank you.
Thank you for seeing that and reflecting it back to me. It truly means a lot. And especially the piece that you touched on with the energy, because that's one of the building blocks of prosilience that I truly love to share and first share, especially with family caregivers, is being able to manage your personal energy. Because without energy, we can't fuel our human resilience. And I kind of play a little bit with this because as a caregiver or even a patient, people say, be sure to take care of yourself. Like, make sure you do self-care. And sometimes I like, yes, I feel very peaceful right now, but sometimes I wanted to just throw something like, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? How do I do that? Where do I find time? And so I've been playing with it. And I really do believe the evolution of caregiver self-care equals managing your personal energy, your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, so that you can fill yourself as you move through life's challenges. That's the sustainable piece. And then there are several other cool parts of the framework that can help you build and plan and nourish your resilience for the future. But really, the work we can do right here every day without a lot of extra effort is being aware of our personal energies and learning how to identify where we might be drained and how to plug the leak, and then how to fill ourselves back up.
Mm.
And this is a cyclical process.
Right.
It's ongoing. And at some point, like, oh yeah, I plugged that physical leak. And yes, I've been filling it. And then, oh hey, now my mental needs a little, where you're like, oh wait, okay, yeah, you took care of the mental, but now, hey, guess what? Let's look at our physical again. But it can be practiced even with micro challenges during our day, so that it becomes a part of our bones and our
Mm.
DNA and just how we're being and how we're showing up.
There's so many places I want to go right now. I'm trying to mentally decide which path I want to take us down. I would love to hear more about these other pieces of the framework, but since we're already on this piece, maybe it would
Mm-hmm.
make sense to first start here where we're at. So when you're talking about this energy management piece, especially in light of, the people that you support in your lived
Mm-hmm.
experience, what are some of the ways you walk people through this? What are some of those tools and resources that people can lean on to build this and to invest in themselves in this way?
Sure. I mean, well, the very first thing always is to be able to slow down just enough so that we can be aware of, what's going on in our bodies, in our minds, in our emotions, how we're feeling in a space. A lot of times, it's easiest to start with physical energy. And so it's also kind of the boring stuff, right? Because everyone talks about, oh, the pillars of well-being and like sleep hygiene, hydration, and food, but those are the foundations. So let's take a look at that. Let's say, like, as a caregiver, a lot of times we don't get a lot of rest. One of the first things I remember before I was like a medical caregiver was when we first brought our daughter home after we adopted her. And everyone was so concerned about us being rested. And the first thing they always said was, nap when she naps. Like, no, but I got to do all this other stuff. No, nap when she naps. So when you're tired, you know that if you don't take some time to rest and refresh that way, you don't plug that leak by not doing the laundry and resting instead, that's going to drain your physical energy. Even when our physical energy is drained, it affects the other three. They're all interconnected. Have you ever maybe lost some sleep the night before, and then the next day you just find yourself maybe more mentally foggy or a little more snappy at people
Yeah. Emotionally
emotionally?
distraught is my,
Yes.
yeah, if I don't get
Yes,
enough sleep.
that's great. So what I invite people to do is say, yeah, it might sound silly, but let's take a look at, where do you think you're losing the most physical energy? during this caregiving journey. And a lot of it is that not feeling like you have the time to rest. That is the first thing we have to do. Let's plug that leak. There might be some mind shift work that we need to do as well with that. But rest is the most important thing to start refueling your body.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that physical care piece, right? I think we know at some level, I mean, we know we need to eat healthy food and stay hydrated and get rest and move our bodies. We've heard
Mhm.
this, and yet so many of us do not prioritize, especially in the light of challenges or busyness,
Mhm.
whether that's, caregiving or just, work is, ramping up, or
Yeah.
you've got a lot of life changes you're navigating. You were just married, or you bought a house, or like you said, you bring your new baby home, or you adopt.
Right.
There are these changes, and what the first thing to go usually is the thing we need the most, right?
Exactly. Well, and I love the way that you brought that up because when we think of challenges traditionally, I think we all have this negative connotation associated with it. But the way that you laid it out there too, it's like, no, challenges are changes in the way that we're using our energy, really. And
Hmm.
they can be, if we want to label them, good or bad. Uh, right? It could be applying for a new job, a new promotion. That's the challenge that's going to take a different type of your energy usage, or moving in with someone after you get married or you partner. That's going to
Hmm.
take a whole other. And those are both quote unquote good challenges that we raise our hands for. And so to keep in mind that even when we raise our hands for something, we can be mindful of how we're like, I love how much you use the word nourish, how we're nourishing ourselves and our energies as we move through different life phases.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all of those changes. You mentioned job change. That's definitely one I see a good amount with people I'm working with, because they're often dealing with career challenges when they
Yeah.
come to me. They maybe want to change careers, or they want to advance their career, or their career is burning them out. And
Yes.
so there's a change coming one way or another, and that shift, even if it's a good one, even if it's a really positive change, it, like you said, it requires a change in the way their energy is being used.
Mm-hmm.
If it's adjusting to a new role or a new company or a new field, that takes a different kind of energy too. And I can only imagine, I guess the difference between some of these things is that eventually you drop back into a kind of flow, a rhythm. Whereas when you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with more ongoing caregiving type of roles, the equilibrium, I imagine, is different because there's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how that shows up with yourself and who you work with.
Well, it's a roller coaster, right? Well, even as a patient, I'm doing really well with my second kidney. And every 3 months, I need to go in for lab work. So I'm so far out. I've been doing this so long that I don't really, quote unquote, drain my energy worrying about that lab work and what might come back. But what I do see a lot, I work a lot with caregivers of young patients, and specifically because of my experience with my daughter, those with pediatric brain tumors or cancer. And there's something called scanxiety
Mm.
that's thrown around. And it's not a word that I really love. It kind of reminds me of the word stress and how we bucket emotions into stress, but then we don't really break them down so we can really manage them. But when you are caregiving for someone with a life-threatening chronic illness, you don't know what's around the next corner. The doctors will lay out certain prognoses or certain protocols, or these are the steps. And then always in the back of your head, it's like, oh, we don't really know what's going to happen for us. So it's being able to take a look at that worry that is a mental and emotional drain of energy. And how can we be more present in the day that we're on so that we don't drain ourselves of the energy that we may need tomorrow?
Mm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's You have to be more mindful in your use and your restoration as you're going, because you there is this unknown that, I mean, yeah, it's almost like a known unknown. Like you
Yeah.
know that there are going to be ups and downs as you're on that journey, but you don't know when it's going to happen or
Mhm.
what that's going to look like or when you're going to need that extra energy. So you have to just, I imagine, love yourself and care for
Mhm.
yourself in a whole other capacity to be prepared for those ebbs and flows on the journey.
Right. And personally, I try to spend most of my time in the present, not saying that I'm being Pollyanna, if you get that reference, and
Yes.
not look to what could happen in the future. But I've been through enough to know that you can make all the plans in the world for your health and something completely different could happen. My kidney doctor growing up would always say that. Well, this is what's going on. This is what we expect to happen. But you never know because this is Jenn. She likes to do her own thing. And so even supporting other parents right now or myself and my husband as we move through this diagnosis with my daughter is being present now, knowing what we need to do now, knowing that there's an MRI in 3 months, but also knowing that any energy that we expend worrying and quote unquote planning leading up to that MRI is only going to drain us. It's not going to help us prepare for anything.
Right. It's going to be what it is when that time comes. But if you're spending all of your energy for 3 months leading up, all of the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities you'll miss and how tired you'll be by the time you get there, kind of it takes a bigger toll than
Mm-hmm.
to just wait until it's time and then
It
deal
does. And
with
I think
is.
one thing that's interesting and that I've noticed and experienced in society is that most of us have been taught that the way that you show you care and love is the amount of worry that you expend.
Mm.
And that really couldn't be further from the truth.
That is an incredibly powerful observation and one that I had not thought about, but that's yeah, that's so accurate. That is how we are taught to show that we care, and it's such a draining approach where you're not, like you said, being present. You're not maybe there in the moment with the person you love, enjoying the life that you're living that day, that moment, because you are, so invested in this worrying trait.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's normalize it. It's completely human and completely understandable that we do that. And if it serves you, then by all means, don't quote unquote worry about it, right? If it doesn't, if you notice that, hey, yeah, this is draining my energy, I want to plug this leak,
Mm.
then, take a look at it. And one other important thing that you brought up that is one of the building blocks of prosilience is that choosing the strategy with which to meet the challenge. And there are 3 ways that we can do that. And we can combine them as well. But the one that really resonates with me and that I use quite a bit on my journey is the strategy of accepting what is and then adjusting.
Mm.
You can also change, the circumstance or the challenge if it's something that you can. And also, I'm sure you're very familiar and your listeners are familiar with the reframing technique.
Yes.
So, yes. So we can do all of those things or one of those things. One thing that has served me quite a bit is that idea of accepting, not from a complacency standpoint, but like realistically, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
And how do I want to move forward in it? That's the only place we have power.
Right. Acceptance, I think people, it gets a bad rap because it feels like, I think when people hear, oh, you just accept it, there's this stickiness around it where people think that it means like giving up or
Right.
not caring or something along those lines. But really it's what you just said. It's this is the situation. It's
Mhm.
not fighting with reality because that's a drain of that energy that we're talking about. To fight what is exhausting.
And
So
futile,
yeah.
unless it's one of those challenges that you can change. Me
Yeah.
needing a kidney, not one of those challenges I could change. But what I could do was adjust the vision I have for my life, how I might do some things. Do I, I just wrote an article like remembering when I was 17, thinking, oh my gosh, is someone going to love me with all of my scars?
Mm.
Will anyone ever want to date me? I've been married 22 years now. Also, will I ever have a family? It's something that I knew that I wanted. I knew I couldn't carry children after a kidney transplant because of the medications that would be harmful. And so as soon as my husband started and we started dating and getting serious, we had that discussion. I'm like, hey, listen, if you want to be with me and we want a family, we're going to need to find a different way to do it. So it was just always, we accepted that's what the reality was, and we adjusted our vision of how to get there.
Mm. Yeah. So that's a powerful example. And I'm wondering, so you mentioned there were these kind of three things. So
Mm-hmm.
accept, reframe.
Mm-hmm.
What was the third?
Change.
Change. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that could be more along the lines of a challenge at work, a challenge in a position,
Mm.
not being challenged enough in your position. That's something you can do something about. That's something that you can make it more like you'd like it to be.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of evaluating that scope of what is actually within our control,
Mm-hmm.
accepting the things that just are, and then if there is a piece that's in our control that we can change, that we can make a choice, whether that's to stay in the situation or to adjust the situation, make a change in the situation, like having the empowerment to then make that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this weird quirk about me where someone will say something and then I'll just immediately either start reciting a pop culture reference or I'll start singing a song. So anytime someone talks about these strategies and I start thinking of the change one, I forget who sings it, but it's the song like, should I stay or should I go?
Yes.
So I have these little songs that also help make some of this process of prosilience building a little more light
Mm.
and a little more fun because we're usually looking at using these tools when we're in something heavy. And if we can do it with more of a lightness or an optimism or even an openness to being curious about something, we save energy in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that piece of like feeling alive that you mentioned too, like wanting to
Yes.
be alive in your life and to enjoy the moments that we are alive. Like if we can find some fun and some lightness and some joy even in the hardest times, like it just it fills up our souls, you know? It's that like deeper level healing.
Yeah, and it's part of our spiritual energy that being able to connect with a sense of meaning and purpose, even in challenge. And a lot of times I refer to glimmers, which Deb Dana has brought into our forefront thoughts of the opposite of triggers. And
Mm.
so I always ask people, okay, yeah, this is really hard. Can you share one glimmer you had today? Just one. And a lot of times you can find one like, oh, yeah, I was walking down the hospital hallway and the little boy who was there smiled at me. And that made me smile back. Like, really hard circumstance. But that moment of connection and finding a glimmer in that way starts to boost your spiritual energy, which can help your other three. And it also helps the other persons in that
Yeah.
example specifically. But
Yeah. Well, and I think so often they are around other people, right? Like those
mm,
moments of connection or the moments where we realize some kind of beauty, some kind
yeah,
of meaning, some kind of just glimpse into what might be more powerful or bigger
mm,
than just us in that moment, the
yeah.
larger picture of our human species as a community. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's funny that we started talking about this. I mean, not because of serendipity, but um, one of the other building blocks that I work with people on of Prosilience is solving the problem, solving the challenge. And we can do that by engaging resilience muscles. And a very powerful part of this theory is that we are all born with these 7 resilience muscles. And some of them are easier for us to access when we're in challenge, and some are more difficult. Hence the are we going to drain ourselves or not? And those resilience muscles are positivity, confidence, priorities, creativity, connection, structure, and experimenting. And so this wasn't a surprise to me when I did the personal resilience assessment that is within the Prosilience framework. Some of my easiest resilience muscles to access when I'm in challenge are positivity and connection, which is interesting because for a lot of caregivers, those two are some of the hardest to access and take the most energy when we're in challenge. And so, I do a lot of noodling then on myself, kind of like, okay, what supports me in those muscles in a way as a caregiver that, someone else would be supported differently, or like I don't really access my structure muscle as easily as some other caregivers. And so it's just a very interesting insight into how we work within a challenge. And then the even better thing is that if you'd like to have, say, your positivity muscle easier to access and use during a challenge, we can come up with a workout plan for you to do that day by day so that when you come to a challenge, you can have a bigger roster of your resilience muscles available to you to support you in the challenge.
I love that. I love the way it's framed as being these prosilience or resilience muscles, because there are these things that you may or may not have strength in already, but you can build that strength just like we can condition our bodies and build that strength in our bodies. And that's just such an empowering way to look at it, because it acknowledges that even if something is weak now, it can be stronger, and that there's also, like you said, those natural pieces where maybe you do already have a really strong muscle in this one area, and that's going to really support you, and to be able to tap into that intentionally.
Yeah, I found it very insightful for myself and for the clients and the groups that I work with.
Yeah. So tell me more about the rest of these building blocks. I feel like we've kind of like organically
Yeah,
started to peel away, but let's just yeah, bring to light some of these other building blocks that you use and kind of how they show up. So whatever order or structure feels good to navigate these, let's just share this framework in a little more detail.
perfect. Yeah, so there are 4. We've already talked about 3 of them. One of them, I'm sure you're also very familiar with. We kind of frame this as the first one that you want to engage, which is calming yourself,
Mm,
self-regulation techniques. How can we bring our wise mind online in moments of challenge? We There are so many ways that we can do this. So it's working with your client or the group that you're working, coaching. What feels good to them? How do they come back into their parasympathetic nervous system easiest, so that then we can move on to the next building block, which would be choosing a strategy. We talked about that. With this
mhm.
challenge, do we reframe it? Do we change it? Do we accept and adapt? And then once you have your strategy chosen, you solve the problem by engaging your resilience muscles,
Mm,
which are those 7 that I mentioned. And then the one that's kind of always on the end, but I think actually is the buoy underneath all of them, is that managing your energy,
mm.
because we know that energy fuels resilience. So
Yeah.
to be able to start working on, maybe I usually do start working with people on looking at glimmers, looking at how to calm yourself and engage self-regulation techniques, and then bringing in managing the energy with that, because from there you're going to have more space to explore the strategies, and then also how you want to solve the problems using your resilience muscles.
That makes perfect sense, because you have to kind of move out of that stress response, that
Mm-hmm.
survival uh, impact that it's having on your nervous system when everything is so activated. You have to create some space there first.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, some of these other things are just not going to feel like they matter at all. Like,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's like the sometimes even when you learn tools for healing or personal development, there's still this fog that's keeping you from being able to really access all those tools in your toolbox. So the calming yourself, self-regulation techniques are super important to really have become part of your DNA. I'm saying it again, like just have it be part of your response in the moment. The more you can, literally, when I first learned about calming myself and self-regulation techniques 7 years ago, when I became a general personal and professional development coach, I practiced breathing for 3 months. I have this wonderful binder of all of these other tools and readings and theories and philosophies. And I was breathing because that's what I could do. That was back when I was a wall kicker or a wall puncher, because I wasn't able to have an awareness or an acceptance or understanding of my emotional and energetic response to what my daughter was going through and processing after her medical trauma initially with her diagnosis. And so there was a lot of boundary work going on, but I couldn't even think about boundary work until I could breathe and engage my parasympathetic nervous system. Because like you said, I was in such fight or flight that there was not much more I could do. But there's still a scuff on a wall downstairs where I reacted versus responded. And I don't really even want to paint over it, because I know how much more powerful it is for me to see that and remind myself about how responding serves me versus how reacting doesn't serve me. It drains all of my energy.
I think that's really just really insightful that you recognize the power of that reminder of where you have been and how far you've come. And I think we've all had moments on our journeys where the emotional regulation piece maybe wasn't the best, the strongest muscle, right?
Right.
I've definitely, I mean, I think most of us in the healing space or the coaching personal growth space, like we got to it because we needed it. It's the
Yes.
medicine first, and then we experientially heal and we're able to then help others with it. But to also really honor where we've come from and how hard it is, I think, for people in the beginning when they don't have these tools, or maybe they know about them, maybe they're reading a lot, but they're still in such fight or flight that the application feels, miles away.
Right. And that's one thing I really, really focus on with people is I don't like to talk all the time, although being on podcasts, you might find that silly. And I do like to talk, but it's not like a sit and get where you're going to have an aha and walk away and then your life is going to change. No, it's about taking these small bits of things that resonate with you and walking out into the world and practicing them day after day, so that, here we go again, they become a part of your muscle memory and your DNA, and you just show up the way you want to show up. And like, I'm not gonna lie, here comes another song. If you know Paula Abdul, I take 2 steps forward, I take 1 step back.
Yes.
Like, that's still reality for me, especially if my physical energy is low. Am I going to have a more reactive interaction with someone? Most likely. And so that's also where you're talking about, being able to have grace and space and nourishment for yourself and for others, so that we can reset, know where we want to be and who we want to be and how we want to show up, and just keep enacting our tools.
Yeah, and that self-forgiveness when we do take the 1 step back, because it's inevitable. We're still human no matter how much we know. And I always think it's funny when, I don't know, when you're an expert in this space, when you help others in this space, I think you start to hold yourself to a beyond human standard or something. Like, because I know all of these things, I'm going to be able to use them all the time. And that's just not reality. Like, we all have those moments still. So to find some care for ourselves after that happens.
Definitely. I had a mentor who, when I first started learning, she would always go, "It's okay. It's okay, sweet girl." Like, to herself. She'd be like, It's okay, sweet girl." So I remember that. Or I'll ask people like, "Hey, let's just, extend your arms around yourself and give yourself a little squeeze and a hug. And my daughter especially will roll her eyes, but a lot of people then appreciate like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I can care for
Mhm.
myself just as I can care for others.
Mhm. Yeah, we need it. We need it just as much as the people around us do.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So, of these building blocks, are there any in particular that you notice people struggle with the most or take kind of need the most support through? I guess what's your experience of that?
I think because reactionary response, like reactions, are so hardwired within our pathways, the calming and self regulation can be the hardest to access and remember to use more regularly than some of the others. I think the other ones are, I'm going to include managing energy in with that one too. But when you talk about strategy and we're talking about solving, people are like, yes, like
Yes. Yeah.
I can grab onto that. That's tangible. This calming stuff, this breathing, this talk of four different energies that we all have, like are these things that I can actually, yeah, you can put them into practice and they can support you. But I think just the way that we operate in the world normally, being able to say, oh, I have strategies and I have problem solving skills, so it's mostly the calming and self-regulation that tend to take a back seat. They're also the ones that can get us out of alignment a little bit more, or when we're out of alignment, it's more difficult to access and remember like, oh yeah, I can just breathe. Like I have this precious tool that I carry with me all the time. And it can be the pause button for my brain when my brain's starting to go a little haywire, but we forget because that's how our brains work.
Mhm.
But I would definitely say that the calming one, until that really just becomes a part of how you show up in the world, is more difficult to access than some of the others.
That makes perfect sense because it's almost, I think, in because we're both in the US. So
Mm-hmm.
in the US, there's a lot of emphasis on the doing things.
Yes.
And sometimes breathing or sleeping, doing those more quiet
Mm-hmm.
strategies that might not look like much is going on, but a lot's happening on the inside are not as
Yeah.
validated and appreciated by our
It's so
society.
true.
Yeah.
Or I sometimes I'll say like, "Oh, how are you liking being a human doing?"
Yep.
Right? Like we are called human beings, and yet we do almost everything in our power to be the opposite of that.
Hmm.
And so it's a complete mindset. And also, what society and culture is telling us is in contradiction to what might feel best to us. And so it takes more energy to start using that. But when you do, oh my gosh, how great does it feel? Because you know that that's where your power lies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we can get that resource that we can draw from indefinitely, within ourselves, within these strategies and techniques. But I do think some people, I mean, I know some people struggle with guilt even around it though.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, like I can't because, and all of the excuses and all the reasons why it's selfish or out of reach for them to
Yeah.
be able to take those little pauses. Like breathing, you don't even have to take time or space. You can do it in conversation with
You
someone.
can, like right here, I could just be, maybe I'm, in reactionary for some reason. I could just be breathing and you wouldn't even know. I was at a wonderful retreat for families of children with brain tumors. And one of the speakers who came to share, I wish I remembered her name, she shared this, and it speaks to what you were just saying. And let me try to get this right. She says, we've heard the part that self care isn't selfish. I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I get that. And then she said, it's actually fuel for the selfless. So
Mm,
self care isn't selfish, it's fuel for the selfless.
mm.
And that really stuck with me.
I love that. And I think that's something that the people who are worried about being selfish through self-care are these selfless souls that are in a caregiving role, whether that's through
Yes.
their work or with their family. They want to give. And so that's the barrier. It almost bumps up against their value of helping and being in service, this idea of caring for themselves.
Hmm.
But if they can see that as a fuel up so that they can be
Keep
selfless,
serving. Yes.
yeah, ugh, I
I
love
loved
that.
when she said that. I'm like, oh,
Thank you for sharing that. That is
you're
beautiful. I'm
welcome.
definitely going to pass that along. I know some people right now that would resonate with that.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
So, I guess while we're on the topic of self-care, one
Mhm.
of the things you said to me when we first talked that I wrote down because I was like, yes, I really want to bring this back up.
Oh,
So,
great.
you, I think it will go perfectly with where we're going with this conversation. But you said self-care doesn't help when your soul is tired.
Yeah.
Talk to
Yeah.
me a little bit about this.
So it's that idea of doing all of the things to take care of yourself, like even taking time out to have a bubble bath, the traditional physical self-care kind of things that we think about. If you are not in tune with what your inner truth needs, or if you are not in tune with your spiritual energy, whether that be connected to a religion or not, but that piece of connecting with a sense of meaning and purpose, your soul is withering.
Mm.
And when your soul withers, so does everything else. That idea came from a meme that I saw on social media. And it was one of them was a woman laying on the ground like a cartoon woman and just said, all the women in me are tired.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me. And then the other one I saw was that idea of self-care doesn't help when your soul's tired. Like when you are not able to spend some time with the deepest places of yourself and nourish them, all of the sleep, all of the hydration, all of the nutrition, all of the pickleball games are only temporary fixes. They're band-aids,
Mm.
much needed band-aids. But where can we commune with a deeper part of ourselves so that we're making sure our pilot light is on and being fed energy
Mm.
and feeding our soul?
Yeah, yeah. This resonates so much, I think, for me personally and where I've been at different points in my journey, but also something I see a lot when people start to do this personal growth work, this healing
Mm,
work, and they do the self-care. Maybe they find a way, they get the strategies, they learn the techniques, they're doing the exercise routines, they're making sure they're getting enough sleep, like they're doing the things and they're like, why do I still feel this way?
yeah.
It's like a deep ache
Mhm,
and they're doing all the things they should be doing, but if they haven't factored in that piece of purpose, meaning, fulfillment, soul, some connection to something, whatever that thing might be for you
mhm,
that gives life that fire, all of the other stuff it you just go through the motions and it doesn't provide that same level of nourishment.
mhm.
So we talked a little bit about the energy, and it sounds like this kind of fits into that piece, right? So it's the spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, all of these different
Mhm.
kind of buckets. Are there things that you do or suggest or use to support people, especially in accessing maybe that spiritual piece? Because I think that's one that
Mhm.
we tiptoe around sometimes, and people might need some support or suggestions on how to tap in.
Sure. Well, one way to tap into your spiritual energy is to simply ask the question, what's important to me? Not what do I have to do for work? What do I need to do to take care of the house? What do I need to do? No, what's important to me?
Mm.
Because when we can come up with that, and spend some time on how we might um, grow that within ourselves. I also invite people then to write a mission statement. I mean, companies have them. Do we have a mission and vision for ourselves? Yeah, we might have a 5-year goal of what we want to save or where I want to be in my career, but what's important to me? How am I going to nurture that in my day-to-day life?
Mm.
For me, it's joy. Joy is important to me. I am on my fourth kidney, the two that I was born with, and the two that were selflessly donated to me.
Mm.
What's important to me is experiencing joy in life, even in hardship. How do I find little pieces of joy in life? I look for glimmers. Thank you, Deb Dana, for that. I love that, right? My look for hearts. We'll send each other pictures of hearts. Like if I'm, at the grocery store and she's at school and I see a puddle or a leaf that looks like a heart, just slowing down. What's important to me? Not this hamster wheel life that a lot of us find ourselves on, but like, what do I want? It's the Notebook movie scene with Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. What do you want?
Yeah.
What's important to you? And start fueling that in your day.
Mm. I just have the most powerful like memory of that moment in the movie. That's such a good like imagery to bring up. Like if you were to shake yourself and ask like, what
What
do
do
you
you want?
want?
I remember him being like, no, what do you want? And it's like, I think it's pouring. And so it's like
Mm-hmm.
not in great circumstances and just like getting down to brass tacks. Like, what do you want?
Mm.
What's important to me?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said you have people create like a mission or vision or some kind of statement to kind of anchor into this too. It actually brought up in my memory there was a writing class I took and one of the writing prompts we had to do was a what matters prompt and it
Oh,
was like a
yeah.
free write where you everything that comes to mind and it would you just had to start it with what matters is. And that was like the theme for the writing. And I remember getting so much more from that than a writing experience. Like it was a soulful experience. It was a self-discovery
Mm-hmm.
moment. And that sounds like that's kind of similar to this exploration you bring people through and encourage them to embark on so they can find that anchor to bring them into their spiritual meaning in the
Yeah.
world, however that might look for them.
Well, and another reason or another thing I ask people is like, why are you working so hard to heal if you aren't going to live?
Mm.
And part of that for me is being able to separate, the worry from the joy and that moments of happiness that we can find. And like the worry part isn't really living to me. That's me. So I'm not going to work so hard to heal myself and help my daughter heal if we're not going to do things that truly make us feel alive
Mm.
and that are life giving, which to me are those things like glimmers and trying not to worry. And if I'm having anxiety, pausing and figuring out how I can support myself to not need to feel that way. Because, all emotions are messengers and they're here to tell us something. So when we have an emotion or a sensation, let's practice the pause and figure out what it's trying to tell us. So I don't know, for me, it's to get the most meaning out of life, but I don't know what it would be for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that's something emotional like awareness is like big on my toolbox. Like I really
Yeah.
lean into that because like you said, emotions are messengers and if we're not really meant to stay in them. We're not meant to stay in them indefinitely because
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes an energy drain. Like we're meant to experience them
Mm-hmm.
fully, allow them to move through us
Mm-hmm.
and listen to the message so that we can move to the other side of it. Like it's not meant to stay stuck. It's
Right.
supposed to move through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our time. I can't even believe this hour has flown by. I would
It
love to
has.
hear a little bit more from you about this piece that you just kind of like beautifully wove back in around aliveness and
Mm.
being alive within it and not waiting to live. And I think this is something that, you mentioned you especially see with people who are navigating caregiving or chronic illness, and you support others with it. And it sounds like it's also one of those things that's just deeply personal and meaningful to you. So I'd love to hear if there's anything you want to share with our listeners on this piece.
Yes and no. I tread a little lightly on this because it has upset people in the past. But one thing that I do believe is that you don't have to wait until things are better to live better. And by that, I mean, we can get caught up in all of the minute to minute things we need to do as a caregiver, and it starts to drain us and it brings our mental and our emotional and spiritual energy down. And then we just don't think that anything can be good, and we don't have moments of precious time with the person that we're caring for. So I shared that once and it brought someone to tears.
Mm.
And I realized that that person's interpretation of it was me saying to her, oh, don't worry, once your loved one has transitioned, things will be better.
Oh.
And that's not at all what I meant. What I meant is, this is a dress rehearsal. This isn't a dress rehearsal. This is our performance. This is
Right.
our
It's happening
life.
now.
It's
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So as we're doing these mundane things that need to be taken care of for the person's physical health, how are we connecting in the other ways that are the most precious and the most important for whatever time we have with that person? So when I say don't wait until things are better to live better, I mean, it, it, the only thing that's going to make this challenge change is one, the way that you show up in it, or if the challenge doesn't exist anymore.
Mm.
And for a family caregiver, if that challenge doesn't exist anymore, it means the person that we most love, that we're giving ourselves of to take care of, also isn't with us on earth anymore. So, how can we be fully present with ourselves and with the person that we love, that we're caring for, so that we make the most of our time here on earth? I have been given a great privilege of so many bonus days. There's a new magazine out that's photographed by a heart transplant patient, and it's stories of transplant patients who are sharing their bonus days. Like, what do we want our bonus days to be full of? Don't wait until things are better to live better.
I love that. That last piece just gave me goosebumps. Just this idea that each moment is precious, and especially when you're navigating, chronic illness or caregiving, like these are moments that you'll never get back. And even in the challenge, there's this like infusion of love and life that can be just really powerful and seeped in everything you're doing with care and intentionality if you choose that.
I love that. Yes. Intentionality. And actually, when uh, that, not purveyor isn't the right word, but Linda Hoops, who developed Prosilience, she actually calls it like intentionally building your capability to deal with life challenges before you encounter them.
Mm.
Intentionality. What do we want to infuse our days and thoughts and minds and spirits with? Let's do that first, and then
Yeah.
meet the challenge from there.
Oh, I love that. And I appreciate you sharing this framework that, you've learned from her, but that you live out in your life and you share with your clients. I think this is something I work in the organizational development space as well as in the life
Beautiful.
coaching space. So I'm like,
Yeah.
this just aligns perfectly. And I think it makes so much sense in an organization where you want people to be able to show up in a place of thriving and of growth, even through challenge, just as much as it is at home when we're with our loved ones. Like it's without barriers, right? Like this is
Yeah.
a framework that can support us no matter where we stand as human beings. So,
Yeah, it's a human skill. And like I said, it was developed first for the organizational development space, and wonderful training offered by Resilience Alliance in personal resilience practitioners that then can work within an organization, and a whole team synergy framework. It's just wonderful. But like I said, as I read the book, I knew that this was how I was doing what I was doing, and I wanted to be able to share it with others. And then being able to train with her and speak with her, and for her to say to me, like, you embody Prosilience. Just, I don't know what it did. It just changed so much. And I realized that this is what I'm meant to be sharing. And I'm hoping that people can take pieces from it and apply it from our conversation, and just start to decide how they want to show up in their lives, in what energy, and how they want to protect and replenish their energy as well.
Yeah, I have no doubt that the listeners have gotten so much from this. I've gotten so much from this. This shared space with you has been so powerful and so infused with care and presence. And I'm so grateful. Before we wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you do want to share with the listeners? Anything maybe you hoped we'd get to, but we didn't, or just final kind of closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
I believe that whatever is meant to be shared has been shared. So I don't think that there's anything else to cover. Just, I do love the piece that you start with. Like, let's remember to be gentle with ourselves and nourish ourselves so that we can continue to show up the way we want to.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, can you tell everyone where they can find you if they want to stay in touch with you, they want to see the work you're doing in the world, they want to work with you? Where do they go?
Well, best place would be my website, prosiliencecoach.com, PROSILIENCE coach.com. And there is actually a resource on there that can walk you through the idea of managing energy, because I said that is my favorite piece, as well as the one I think is foundational for building your proactive resilience. So that's available there with some description, as well as a checklist to start helping you pay attention and be aware of how you're using your energy in the world. So I think I'd love to invite people to visit me there.
Amazing. Yes, and we'll have all the links to connect with Jenn in the notes from the episode, so you can find easy access there, and encourage you to stay connected and follow her work. But most importantly, encourage you to take anything that you've learned from this conversation into your life, as Jenn spoke to, and as I'm constantly sharing on the show. Don't leave it in the car or your walk or wherever you're learning and you're listening from. You have to bring it into your life if you want those results. If you want, as Jenn so beautifully said, you want to make this part of your DNA, make this part of the way you function in the world, you have to practice. So pick maybe just one thing that really stood out and start there, and then you'll have something to build from. So with that, thank you again, Jenn. This has been so lovely. And to everyone who is listening, I hope you take really good care of yourselves and use some of these new tools to do that. Until next time, bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life, or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com, or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.